All right, well, thanks everyone for joining. This session, we're going to be covering a topic that's near and dear to my heart. I'm actually a customer success manager at Sumo Logic. I've been with Sumo for 3.5 years. Obviously, customer experience and improving that is one of my main objectives as a CSM. And so I want to talk you through how Sumo Logic does it for our own customers to give you ideas on sort of how you can use Sumo Logic for this particular use case within your own organization. So as you heard earlier in the keynote, we have customers like SmartThings that has widely adopted Sumo Logic. And we want to see that type of sort of pervasive adoption across all organizations that utilize Sumo. And so we believe that customer experience should be the forefront of your business model, right? And one of the things the three things that I want you to take away from this session is understanding the power of logs, right? And how it can help other teams, other organizations that aren't using Sumo Logic today. Think about the information that logs captures and how you can sort of use Sumo Logic to provide visibility into some of that data. The second thing I want you to take away is just some of the key features of Sumo Logic that can help support this. I'll be showing you how we do it internally, and hopefully that gives you an idea on how you can start to think about I would say putting a configuration together similar to ours that'll allow you insight into your customer base and your users. The third thing is around creating an action plan. So, talk to me after this, mingle with me, I guess, in the common areas. Ask me whatever questions you might have around how Sumo does it, and I'll be glad to answer that. There's some neat tooling that we do and automation that we do, which I'm not going to talk about in great detail here, but would be happy to show that to you in a one-on-one session. So I'm sure that you all understand how important it is to keep customers, right? It's what drives our business. It's what drives our revenue. And other companies and other CEOs and leaders have understood this as well. So Ramin mentioned earlier, we hired a company, 451 Research, to survey customers undergoing digital transformation. One of the questions we asked them on that survey was, think about how you're planning to spend your dollars on software over the next year. What are your top priorities? What is your focus? And over 45% of the respondents, basically said customer experience is what I'm going to spend my most money on. Right? And I'm sure that if you talk to your own CTO, CIOs, they'll all say the same thing. Because experience is the name of the game, right? It's not necessarily price or product. You can have great price or great product, but if your users are having a bad experience, then we're in a day and age where they demand greatness. And so if you're not delivering that greatness or delivering that service, they're going to look elsewhere. And with the SaaS-based model, it's really easy for them to convert from one service to the next, right? So experience, not price or products, is the battleground. Does anyone disagree? All right, awesome. So why do you want to provide visibility to this data? Well, first, democratization of this data is going to be key, right? Getting out of having to log into these VPNs, right? Ubiquitous access to this data is very, very important, right? Because you want to drive closure to tickets much sooner, right? You don't want people scrambling to find their token to resolve an issue, where they could just log into a solution to do that. You want to empower the front line. So these are the people that support your customers. People in the sales organization, for example. Some of the data that you're collecting can actually help them identify some opportunities that they have on specific accounts, right? To grow the account. So in a land and expand model, that's absolutely important, right? So even though you close a deal, you're still going to have to look for ways to identify features that they may not be taking advantage of, and sort of trying to identify ways to sort of grow the footprint on the account. From a support standpoint, right? Your support engineers probably are using Sumo Logic today. How many of you guys have support engineers that are using Sumo? Awesome. I want to see more hands next year, right? So, to drive closure to issues much faster, they're going to need to have data in their hands, right? So, I've been in support organizations where, again, like they'll VPN into, these different servers, and we'll have access to that one server, and a new issue comes through, then they have to log out, log back into a different console. So it's very time consuming, right? And having the ubiquitous access to that data is going to be important for them to drive down the mean time to troubleshoot, mean time to investigate, and so forth. Your PS organization. Think about the data they need to understand whether or not they're making a difference, right? Onboarding customers. Are customers actually utilizing the features that they've taught them to use? If that's not happening, then the PS organization is not doing their job. But how do you measure that, right? So you're probably going to need some machine data and some insight from the logs to be able to tell whether or not the type of usage you're looking for is actually occurring. Customer success, an organization I represent, right? We're chartered to ensure that you see value in the solution. So we also want to be a proactive organization that looks after our customers. So we need to know what's happening on our accounts. So Bradley, in the previous session from Genesis, actually gave some kudos to our TAM organization. And so what he mentioned was we were pretty proactive in terms of reaching out to him when something was going wrong, right? You don't want to wait for those support tickets, right? You want to drive down the number of support tickets, and you want to make sure that, again, if adoption is slipping, that you start to, you take notice of it sooner. Lastly, product management. You're releasing new features. How many of you represent a product management organization in the room? None, okay. One, perfect. So I'm sure you have tools to sort of measure the adoption of new features. But think about in each of your releases, like what type of machine data you can collect that will give you insight into adoption and so forth. And lastly, the reason that you want to provide visibility to this data, especially within Sumo, is to centralize all of that information in one place. As you heard earlier, we are a platform. So it's definitely a way for you to get all this information and give it to the front line as well as your operations teams. So we'll show you over the next couple of slides how we've sort of built Sumo Logic around this premise of improving customer experience. So what were the problems and the challenges that we were trying to address? Well, you got a ton of data, right? I mean, we're a logging company, so we log pretty much everything. We have to identify which of those logs are actually important. There was no place, really, for us to have a single view of all of our customers, so we had to solve for that challenge. And the third, I mean, we're growing pretty substantially year over year, right? When I joined Sumo Logic, it was 3.5 years ago. And we still had the same challenges then that we do now. It's a high velocity, high growth company, and we expect hopefully to double our customer base in the next 2 years, right? The front line didn't have much visibility into what was happening on the account, so we were getting a lot of questions from the sales organization asking us to deliver information around what people were doing in Sumo Logic. What were they searching for? How much data are they sending over? And also providing long-term analyses. They didn't have the data available to them, so we needed to provide that data to them. So how do we implement this? One, we have a really, really awesome architect who already adopted a common logging framework across all of our services. So as you can see in this example here, Actually, I don't know if my pointer is working. We basically have 5 different components that are included in every log message that we have. So we know what deployment this is happening on, what component is logging this. In this case, it's a component called config, as well as any customer names or usernames, which would be included in the logging framework as well. Now, the trouble was, again, there was a lot of data. So how did we go about figuring out what was important? Well, we looked at what people were querying about. Right? We took a look at some of the queries that the support team was running, some of the queries that the product team was running, and also collected the questions that sales had around what information they wanted from their customers. Then we looked at the logs that people were searching, and we tagged them. Right? We basically said, okay, this is important, and I want this particular log line to be treated differently from others. Right? So that allowed us to sort of optimize an environment and actually create a new account to collect all customer usage information. In this account, if you guys aren't familiar with some of these optimization tools that I'm listing out here, field extraction rules allow you to pre-parse data. So as data was coming in, I was taking the common logging framework, extracting the information I needed, like the deployment name, customer name, username. All that was already pre-parsed. That way I can run simple queries like user is equal to blah or foo. Data partitioning. So if you're searching a lot of data in isolation, this was actually something that we did to break out all the different modules and components, so that if we needed to search a particular module, like search, for example, we could do that pretty easily and wouldn't run into search performance challenges. So so these additional considerations, these were additional things that we had considered after we got the data into Sumo and started querying it. We realized pretty quickly that handling long-term analysis was something that we needed to improve on. Right? Those 180-day searches or 360-day searches, was something that we had to solve for. Some of the users were non-technical, right? Again, you're going to start to open this up, right, to people who may not have had query language experience or even coding experience. Knowing which customers to actually touch. So a lot of time and effort was spent in trying to figure out how to score and measure our customers, and we adopted a way to do that. But figuring out which customers to touch, especially for a high growth company, is really important. Because you're going to go from 200 customers to 400 customers per customer success manager and or support engineer, however you may call those individuals. It's going to happen overnight, maybe. It could happen over a year, but it's something that we have to solve for, right? And you can't just keep adding headcount. Ingesting other data is really important to us. I'll talk to you about how we truly are using Sumo as a platform. So long-term analyses. How did we solve for this? So as you know, you can schedule a search to run on a daily basis, and that's what we did. Basically save the results to an index or to a view in this case. And so we have these daily aggregates that we can now use. So rather than scanning millions and millions, actually trillions of messages over a 180-day period, we've narrowed it down to 1,000 messages a day or 1,000 data points per day. Now we're sort of adopting what we released today, logs to metrics. Right? We're taking some of this information, converting it to metrics, and using our metrics engine to power some of the dashboards that we have. So you'll see the screenshot on the right here is an actual dashboard that we've created that measures, the ingest on a particular for a particular customer over a 6-month period, both from a logs and metrics standpoint, as well as the number of logins. So I could see over time how they're trending. And my sales organization actually has access to this, right? So we're using Sumo Logic, we're using Sumo and sort of dogfooding our own product. And because of our sales folks needing access to this information, we had to make it easier for them to search data. So, I mean, we hear you loud and clear. Query language, there needs to be different ways to solve that challenge. But over the last year, we've implemented a few things. I don't know if you guys knew, but those of you who sat through the certification training this morning should know it by now. We have these interactive dashboard filters that you can apply to your dashboards, which will allow you to hone in on specific data sets. We release search templates, which removes the need or the need for anyone to have to write their own search. You can parameterize it so that all they have to do is just punch in an org ID, an org name, or username. It makes it much easier for them to interact with the data. And lastly, content management. So about 6 months ago, we rolled out a new way to sort of manage content, share content across the organization. One of the cool things about content management, which I don't have here, is that a content administrator can actually flag certain items or components, searches, and dashboards as something that they recommend, bringing it to the front of the fold. So this list you have here would look a little bit different. You'll actually have admin recommended searches, right? And so that's what we use to sort of call out all the Sumo on Sumo dashboards that we created. Now that we had this data, we had to figure out, okay, what do I do with it, right? So we grade customers essentially in 3 different ways: how much data they're sending over, what their adoption of the tool looks like, and what is their experience on the product, which we're talking about here, right? If search performance is bad, then guess who picks up the phone call and calls the customer? Somebody either from the support team or from the CSM team, right? We don't have to wait until customers complain about search performance or latency on any of your services, right? I mean, the idea is to get ahead of these issues, drive down the number of support tickets that customers are filing. Being alerted on any substantial changes on accounts is important. So after grading them and figuring out, okay, is my customer healthy or not, doing this over time and tracking to see whether or not a customer goes from a D to a B or the other way around is important, right? We need to know if we need to interact with them now or if we can, hold on a few weeks and reprioritize something else. But you can absolutely use Sumo to run all these calculations. All of this is powered simply by queries that calculate the data that we have. And we have a balanced scorecard, as you can see here, that that we use and that our different business units have access to. So we use to alert ourselves on substantial changes. We use the outlier time compare operators. And I encourage you guys to sort of read up on those operators after this session. If you have any questions, definitely let us know. And because Sumo is a platform, we are also collecting data from about our customers from other services, right? Data about from our CRM tool is going to Sumo every day. Opportunities, who owns the account, right? All that information is being fed to Sumo. Subscription service, how are customers being provisioned? How are they being billed? You guys probably have received an NPS survey from us. What are the results of those surveys, and how can we tie that back to the adoption of the tool? Right? I'm sure you guys all use different services to measure the things that I've just recited. It doesn't have to be the services I have on screen here. The point is, feed that data into Sumo, do some correlation within Sumo to give some better insight about what's happening on the accounts and to see whether or not something is becoming a trend. So taking it a step further, so we do some pretty nifty things with the data. One of the things is we automate some emails. How many of you are actually weekly usage recipients? or know what that is? Okay, one person. So on a weekly basis, every Monday, information about ingest, adoption, feature usage, those are sent to the account owner. So could be your boss, to see, to let them know, how people are using the service and how people are adopting Sumo, right? So they keep a close eye on that. But all of that isn't powered by Sumo itself. We've actually used third-party open source tools to automate some of the emailing and use Amazon SES to actually distribute that. We send data back to the CRM tool. So we use Salesforce in this case, and what we're doing is, feeding the health scores that I showed you from these dashboards, and all of that's going to Salesforce. That way, we could do some reporting on it in the CRM tool. So, overall scores and so forth, those component grades around ingest, search performance, and the likes are all being funneled back into Salesforce. How many of you have partaken in what we call health checks? Okay, so I want to make sure that next year everyone here has gone through some sort of health check. We actually have Excel templates that we've created. And again, we're using the Sumo API. We extract data out of the tool, consolidate it onto an Excel spreadsheet. All that process really takes a few seconds of inputting some few parameters. Sales guys have access to the same tool. It really sort of simplifies the collection of data that we had to do in the past. So it used to take us 30 to 45 minutes to put together an Excel spreadsheet to say, hey, you're using the tool or not using the tool, right? But now we can pull all that information in a matter of seconds. And once you have your data in Sumo and you've identified the important data about your customers and users, you got to protect it. You've got to enable SSO on your account. You want to protect that valuable data so that if there's attrition, people don't take that data with them, right? They'll immediately be disbarred from logging in, and that all happens through your SSO implementation process and the configuration that you've set up. So lastly, one thing that I want you to take away is around building a customer success operations team. So getting this data in is important, but maintaining it, managing it is also something that you may want to consider. The data is going to be in Sumo Logic, and data may change over time. But you need somebody to work with your engineers to make sure that the right data is being tagged. As new features, again, are being released, that you're considering, making sure that the messages that can tell a story are actually tagged and marked and sent to the account. So building an action plan. First thing I would recommend you guys doing is, again, figuring out what data is important to your business, understanding whether or not you can gain insight from any of the logging that you have today. If you don't have the logs about your customers and how they use your tool or service that you offer, you'll try sending that to Sumo Logic, do an internal proof of concept to see if this is something that would be valuable for the rest of the organization. Build metrics, KPIs around the data that you put into Sumo Logic, and deliver reports to your executives, showing them exactly what insight you can glean, right, from all this machine data, and also build some alerting around your customer base. So the most important thing is, again, to try to take action before something actually happens. And that's how you improve customer experience, in my opinion. So I want to thank you for the last half hour. I guess I'll open it up for questions now.
Hi. I was just wondering, do you guys have any machine learning sort of capability in the tool that could provide me insights just based on the data set?
Yeah, so the question was around machine learning. What can you use in the tool to provide you insight? So as I mentioned, one of the operators that I brought out was the outlier operator. It's not necessarily machine learning, but it's an automated way for you to detect statistical anomalies. If if ingestion on a specific customer drops or increases, maybe you get the sales folks involved because it could be an opportunity, right? And ingestion is our sort of pricing lever, but you guys have other pricing levers that you probably want to measure, and want to send to Sumo. So, the time compare operator that I mentioned is also sort of another way to compare data. Like, I want to compare yesterday's data to the week before. Was there a substantial change? And that operator will allow you to actually find those anomalies. Oh, the predict operator, yes. So Rashmi is also from the customer success organization. She mentioned that the predict operator, which allows you to see whether or not a specific metric is trending up or down. We build dashboards around that all the time, so we know, okay, well, we think that in 90 days there could be an issue. You might hit your limit. Or I see a pretty substantial dip in the number of logins on your account. All right, so I guess without any more questions, I'll just stand on the side here. If you want to ask me something privately, feel free to do so. But health checks, if you haven't done one in the last 30 days, come talk to Rashmi or myself. We'll set something up. And my email address is here. Feel free to reach out to me directly. I'm also on the, I'm going to throw a plug in here, but on the Sumo Logic events app. All right, thanks all.